Philip.
Hubert.
Oh no, English again.
It's that time of the year.
Anyway.
The episode you're about to hear, dear listeners, has the same number as, I think, the first little Peugeot. It's called Peugeot in English, Peugeot in Polish. 205. A tiny little car.
And even though we are not going to be talking about Peugeot 205, this is episode 205 of your favorite podcast, and we will be talking about a little wooden boy, and we will not be doing that alone.
Because we do not know that much about little wooden boys.
Yeah,
fortunately.
I know way less than I assumed I did, but we'll get to that.
Okay, so the only little wooden boy all of you should know is Pinocchio, and if you know any other, please do not tell us what it is, because it probably violates the one rule that we have here, which is do not mention Rule 34.
Yes.
And if it is Pinocchio, great, because our guest tonight, or this morning, or whenever you're listening to this episode, is none other than Mr. Senior Animator, Lead Animator, Animation Director, Mr. Tim Allen.
Hello, Tim.
Hello, guys. That's my cue. I have to sort of jump in there, Philippe, as well, because when you start throwing lead animator and senior animator and things around, they're all a bit different on different films, and people get very territorial about which credit they have and wanting to get the best sounding one. So for the benefit of Pinocchio, I am a senior stop motion animator, because we have other animators. We have CGI animators, but we have leads, animators, seniors, some assistants, a supervisor.
Okay, so lead is above senior in this case?
In this case, yeah, and they're all a bit different, just to confuse things. Lead's above senior. I'm senior, then there's animators, and then there's all sorts underneath that as well. But every production is different. I think I was a key animator on Isle of Dogs, which is kind of the same as a senior. So,
and you would know about it because your career in animation is quite long. As your IMDb page states, Philip kind of broke my flow here because I wanted to introduce you by reading the bio that's on you on IMDb, and it is: Tim Allen is one of the UK's leading stop-motion animators. With over 20 years' experience, Allen has animated on some of the biggest stop-motion animation productions in the world, including numerous feature films, TV series, commercials, and short films. That is a long sentence.
Yeah. Did you write that yourself?
No, I didn't. You know who I think wrote that? I think Joseph Wallace wrote that. He, as in director of Salvation Has No Name short film, that I was a guest animator on Salvation Has No Name, just to really confuse things. And he had access to IMDb, and I was updating it at the time. And he said, "Oh, Tim, I'll pop on and write something for you." So
he did a good job.
He did, but do you need to pause for breath? There are a few more commas in the middle of that sentence.
And it's just the first sentence of many more. I'm really afraid to
click on the arrow. Yeah.
We don't want a Tim Allen essay. That would never be a good thing.
Okay, so instead of reading your bio, we talked about your career a little bit, I think, the last time we talked to each other, and that was quite some time.
3.5 years ago, and I wasn't there.
Yeah, or about 80 episodes ago. So this time, I think we will focus on Pinocchio, which is your latest piece of work.
Yeah, it's still fresh in my memory, so that helps. My memory's not what it used to be, so talk about it before I forget, quick.
Yeah, and about forgetting, Hubert, that's your cue now.
Oh yeah, and speaking of forgetting, that is my cue for my first question, which is not a question, is that I watched Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio on Saturday, and immediately I thought, this is my favorite version of Pinocchio ever, but then I realized that I haven't seen any other version in full ever, and I haven't even read the book. I just read some sort of little colorful book from Disney when I was a kid. So that is pretty much the extent of my knowledge about Pinocchio, and I realized that I don't know anything about this story at all.
And now you will compare every other adaptation to this one, and the bar is set very high.
Yeah.
So I say stop there, because if we're to keep this your favorite version of Pinocchio, just don't watch any other versions of Pinocchio, and it keeps the record.
Okay, so have you seen all the other versions of Pinocchio?
No.
Have you seen any other version of Pinocchio?
It's been a long time since I saw the Disney one. Is it from
1940s?
43 in my 43's in my head. It's been a long time since I've seen it. And I know that's got the donkey bit in it, where they go off to the fun fair and they become donkeys, which isn't in our one. And I haven't seen the Tom Hanks one either. And I'm in no big rush from what everyone tells me.
Yeah, we were going to circle back to that one in a little while. But still, this movie is the freshest in your memory. It's your latest one. Can you compare the workload, the atmosphere, and everything connected to working with Guillermo and his team on Pinocchio versus all your numerous other movies and TV shows?
Yeah, well, you say compare. Yeah, okay, I guess I'll start with talking about difference. God, I really enjoyed it. It was so nice to have this kind of way of working, because there's a lot of interviews out there with Guillermo and Mark Gustafson at the moment, because obviously they're doing the publicity thing. And something that Guillermo makes clear is right from early on, they wanted the animators are actors, and they want to really celebrate that notion that we're the performers, is our performance. And rather than give us lots of boundaries or restrictions, or you might have certain films, you'll have very specific frames, you have to hit a certain pose, or sometimes you can be very, very much giving the director exactly what they want by numbers almost. This was much more free, much more liberal. So it was a bit more of a case of you build a kind of relationship, a kind of sense of trust, where you're trying to get what Mark and Guillermo are after. And they talk about the mood and the feeling of the shot. And then there's other little things that they like, which is Guillermo loves his little mistakes, which is when a character goes to pick something up, but they make a little adjustment, or they have a little scratch, or they get slightly distracted for a moment before they find their words. They wanted you to be free to do what felt right as an actor, as a performer. So they give you a kind of general emotional context and certain things that they'd want you to get in. But compared to other films, it was I felt very trusted. I felt a sense of here's what we're after, but you do your thing. You feel it, feel the character, do what feels natural to you. So in that sense, it was lovely, because you can. I mean, I like to feel a shot. I like to kind of find my way through it. Stop motion's a funny language in a way, where you're performing frame by frame, and so it felt very freeing and very trusted. And also, I mean, we sometimes had to kind of go for it and make it work, and I like that. You can plan and plan and plan and plan, and sometimes you over plan, and you need to get in there and just feel it often.
But did it create any confusion at all? Like, did this freedom sometimes cause that shots had to be sort of remade because maybe the end result wasn't what the directors were hoping for?
I mean, there's always that danger. But I mean, Mark Gustafson, he's been stop motion directing for, goodness, it's going to be over 30 years. And I know Mark from Fantastic Mr. Fox as well. He's incredibly good at communicating the information that the animator needs, but at the same time empowering the animator to that. He'll say, I've got faith in you. I trust you. So here's all the information that I think you need. But how you get there, because with a performance, a character starts feeling a certain way, and then they might be a bit less certain, and then their attention or their emotion changes to finishing their line, whatever it is. So Mark will be very, very clear what the key emotional beats are, And how you get there, how you deliver it, is subjective. And any actor is going to perform a line a little bit differently each time, or every animator is going to perform it a little bit differently. So it's like if I gave all three of us the same sentence, we'd all deliver the sentence slightly differently. They accepted from early on that these people are actors, they're performers, let them perform. And so long as they're delivering the feeling, and there's practical things as well, like where the eye line is, or certain beats in the story, or certain hand gestures. Guillermo loves his little subtle hand gestures. So there's a few boxes to tick, but how you deliver the shot is a little bit more liberal, so long as you tick the boxes and give them the things they need.
Okay, so Netflix had the additional bonus, let's say, episode about making the movie. And it said that the directors thought of you animators as actors, and as actors, the animators, had to act out certain scenes and then animate them. So were you an actor? Did you act out any of the scenes that are in the movie?
I'd say pretty much every single one we do it. It's very much the starting point of the conversation. Assuming you've had time, because when your meeting comes with Guillermo's a busy guy, of course, and our chance to have a conversation with him is much more restricted. So assuming that I've had time, I'll try and spend a few hours. You go somewhere quiet, you take the line that you're going to deliver, you listen to it again and again, and then you perform it in front of a camera, and you try and match the camera angle. So you're doing a few takes of the shot. You listen to the voice so many times that you're trying to just feel it and just do it. And I mean, sometimes you do it 10, 20, even 30 times to try and see what ideas came up. And then there might be one or maximum 2 or 3 that you could present to Guillermo and Mark. And that's the beginning of the conversation. So my meeting with Guillermo and Mark together would be, okay, let's look at Tim's live action video. Lav, not lavatory. And live action video. So we'd watch my live action video. Sometimes Guillermo would go, that's great, just like this, just like that. But also it'd be nice if you could add this little hand gesture. Or other times you go, he'd like the beginning, but not so much the end. So my lav would be, it gave us something to look at and respond to. It was a great way of communicating. So Guillermo's more interested in the general performance. He doesn't get into the frame-by-frame detail. I mean, that might be something I'll talk to Mark a bit more, because Mark is much more specifically stop-motion experienced, whereas Guillermo's looking at the bigger picture.
When you talk about it, like you're, as an actor, being directed by Guillermo del Toro, immediately I start thinking, so in that case, were you like assigned a certain scene or character that you had to like sort of, get to understand like an actor would do?
Yeah, well, to begin with, you're all feeling each other out, shall we say, because, I mean, they might have a good idea about my previous work, but they want to feel out which kind of characters they think I'm suited to. And equally, I'm trying to get to know the sort of things they do like to see and they don't like to see. There's this. It's like building any working relationship. You're getting to know how to predict each other's needs, and indeed earn each other's trust. To begin with, my very first shot was Carlo walking in the forest. It's a close up of his feet, and he does a few steps. Then his hand comes into shot, and he picks up a pine cone and holds the pine cone up to show to Geppetto. What does he say? Is it, what about this one? I think that's the line. I'll tell you what, guys. You listen to a line about 1,000 times a day.
That's funny because you just said the line a second ago, and I immediately saw the scene in my head. Like,
yeah. Oh, good.
You sounded just like the character in the movie.
Yeah, you sounded just like a 12-year-old boy.
Yeah, that's a scary thing, isn't it? No, I believe. What about this one? He raises up on this. I guess so. And normally, I will have a break or go and get a coffee or finish the day, have lunch, and I'll completely forget what the line is, even though I've just been hearing it hundreds and hundreds of times. I think it's a self-preservation mechanism that you just have to let it wash through you. Otherwise, you can't go to sleep and go to bed at night time and have the same, what about this one? What about this one? Get out of my dreams, Carlo. First of all, there's people like Peggy Orell did a lot of work developing Carlo. So I won't, before I arrive, so I won't take away from Peggy and all her great work establishing Carlo. But it was an interesting shock because it was, they wanted me to do a lot of acting with the feet and then a lot of acting with the one hand coming in to choose a pine cone. And it's my very first shot. So that was a really interesting challenge, trying to make someone's feet walk as if something's caught their eye and then they takes their attention more, and then a hand has to communicate, I'm going to go for this, no, hang on, I think maybe this one, and he picks it up and goes, yes, this one, and brings it up. That's a lot of thoughts that you have to express with one hand. So it actually was quite a challenging acting shot. I don't think I've made a foot or a hand act as much as that before. So that was, yeah.
Another thing on your resume.
Yeah,
I can act with my feet.
I can emote with my feet. What are my feet feeling? Yeah, I mean, that then led into the Geppetto shots after that, where Geppetto's pointing out the pine cone's broken, which was my first chance to have a go with Geppetto. And I've got a lot of experience with mechanical heads, probably more than the vast majority of the animators there, many of whom were Leica guys who have these 3D printed heads. But I've done so many films with mechanical heads. So I was very comfortable with Geppetto and his animated moustache and lips and eyebrows. But I think looking at that first shot where he's pointing out that the pine cone's got a missing scale, I still was getting a feel for the puppet and the personality of both those characters. So I look at those shots and they're not quite as Geppetto-y as much of Charles's stuff. Charles did loads of stuff developing Geppetto, and Jan Mass did some wonderful stuff with the hungover Geppetto when he wakes up and Pinocchio's come to life. I love Jan's very badly hungover Geppetto. So I'm getting to know the personality of Geppetto, getting to know what does and doesn't work with the puppet in those early shots. So you're never quite as happy with those first shots because you're not quite familiar enough yet. Whereas I then carried on and did lots of stuff with Geppetto and Pinocchio in the church, where Geppetto bestows Carlo's book to Pinocchio, which is a really important moment for Geppetto, because of course for him to pass on his now long lost son's book to Pinocchio is almost showing a warmth and that he's starting to move on. He's starting to let Pinocchio in, and Pinocchio of course doesn't have any clue why this book's important. So I then spent many months with Geppetto and Pinocchio in the church with this book scene, and Geppetto painting the Jesus statue. I'd say really then much of the film really for me was mostly Geppetto and quite a bit of Pinocchio as well. And I got better and better at each character. I'm so much happier with some of my shots later on when I've been on the film for 4 or 5 months, because I'm familiar with the puppets, I'm familiar with the personalities, and I look at that early shot of Geppetto pointing out to Carlo, oh, there's a scale missing on this. I've got to try and remember the line now. This one has a missing scale. See? Don't like that shot at all. He doesn't look quite like Geppetto to me.
Okay, so that's weird because the artist always is the most critical of his own creations. So when you see the movie, and I guess you have seen it more than once in its entirety?
Yeah, I've seen it finished 3 times.
So
and
now
then
when you watch the early shots,
screenings.
You don't like them as much as the later shots?
There's bits where you think, oh man, I wish we wish we could have gone again on that.
Yeah,
and then there's other bits where you
that's
think
kind of
I
funny
nailed
because my
Untrained
thoughts,
eye.
my untrained eye for the entire movie, I thought, Jesus, this is flawless. This is almost perfect. Like the only tiniest little thing I could spot was that sometimes when Pinocchio was moving, the tiny dents and lines on his face were kind of deeper or shallower. They were changing a little bit.
Yes,
that was like
where the eyes slot into his mask, his face, if you will. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and the dents in the wood. Like they were moving just a tiny little bit, and I said, I got you on something. But other than that, I thought everything was perfect. And other than that, I was also wondering how many people, for example, the character of Geppetto, how many animators were like working in total on that character?
Oh goodness, I've no idea is the simple answer, but I think towards the end we'd gone up to something stupid like 40 animators, or maybe it had been 40 in total over the course of the whole production, but that number's in my head. So there'll be a lot of people who stick mostly with Geppetto, which means you're going to do a lot of Pinocchio as well, because obviously there's lots of interaction. You don't just do Geppetto, you'll do Geppetto and whoever else is in the scene, the shot with Geppetto. So there'll be some people who really stayed with him for a good couple of years, and then there'll be those that just do a bit of him. So I would say there must be at least a dozen of us, probably over the course of the film, might even be 20 of us who've had to do Geppetto in some form. I'm grabbing numbers out of the air, but it'll be something like that.
Yeah, which is amazing because the end result is like very consistent. Like you it's not like you can spot, oh, this bit was done by someone and this bit was done by someone else.
The actor changed, right?
Yeah, the actor changed. How do you achieve that?
I need your untrained eye to do all my reviews. But in terms of consistency, and it's all about that's the problem with these big feature films and lots of actors playing the same character. Now, and yeah, we can see differences. I tend to be a little bit more smooth and sometimes restrained. Charles, who did a lot of Geppetto, was much bolder with his eyebrow movements. So, yeah, we can see it, but it depends on the moment as well and what's appropriate, because sometimes Geppetto's tearing his hair out, and then I was doing stuff where he was being very tender and emotional. So it does need to be underplayed, but I probably would more naturally underplay something. Anyway, how do we do it? Well, we have, how do we keep the consistency? We have an animator's Bible, which Brian Hansen, the animation supervisor, that's much of his job is being there from the beginning and working with some of those lead animators who would be some of the very first animators. Oh, and a lead animator, generally speaking, would be there from right early on in a production, and they're designing or discovering the movement of a character, so that they're finding all of the things that you do with this character and all the things you don't do with this character. Brian, the animation supervisor, would be overseeing everything and all the information that the animators are finding as they're testing the puppets and testing the characters, and the information of what works really well with them and what you shouldn't do with the puppets. That goes into this animator's Bible. So there'll be a whole section about Geppetto where you can look at designs of his mechanical head, and you can see how to tighten the screws and things like that, where to hold it, or things that certain angles. There's certain angles where the face looks really bad if you're looking at it from a very low angle, or things to avoid, basically. So there's this whole Bible of things that work really well with the puppet and things that don't work so well, and that's what this testing period is meant to be about. So when someone like me comes along, and I came in the last 8 months of the film, so the film had been going for, goodness, a good 18 months before me, I have to look at all the work with Geppetto that's been done previously by other animators and learn from, I guess you could say, learn from their mistakes and learn from their successes and apply what they've been doing to try and keep that consistency. And sometimes, to be honest, it's harder to come in later and have to copy what the other animators are doing rather than come in earlier and invent something yourself. That's the nature of these films. There's lots of characters to learn, and I could be on Geppetto for 6 months and then I've got a shot with Podesta. and I've never done Podesta before, and I've got to learn how this character works. So if we come back to the actor philosophy, you're learning how to play a character. I suppose it might be someone coming along to play a young Han Solo, and they've got to look at all of Harrison Ford's early work and look at his mannerisms and look at his gestures and try and learn how to copy and repeat it and make it believable.
That's a good comparison. We understand that.
Thank you. I thought that would work.
Okay, but I want to ask a thing that is about two things which you just mentioned. The first one being, how long does it take to complete any given shot, and why is it easier not to shoot the movie chronologically? Because you said you came late into the movie, but you spend a lot of time with the early scenes in the script.
A lot of it is to do with which sets have been made and even which puppets are ready. Obviously, the central characters, they'll get those puppets made first. Okay, if I take the church set, for example, there's a lot of shots in the church set. So they might sit down and work out with a schedule. We need a year shooting the church. We need to look at the church, one side looking at the cross, the crucifix of Jesus, and then we need to look at the church the other direction, looking at all the pews towards the door. But both of those sets are going to be going for a year, so we need to start making the church set now. Whereas the forest set, that's at the beginning of the film for not very long. It's I don't know how many shots there are, but it might only be a dozen shots. So that's less of a priority to get that set made. So it's really about quantifying where is the most work, and the stuff that's going to be the most work and take the most time, we need to start that as early as possible. Otherwise, if you start the church too late, you need 3 churches with 3 animators on them to get it all done in time. And sets like that take up a lot of space as well. Yeah, so it's really just quantifying, if we're going to finish this film by the deadline, when do we have to start? Yes, stop motion is always difficult to get things done on time and on budget, but of course that is the ambition and the ideal.
Okay, so take the church set and all the scenes that take place inside the church. How long was it? Was it really like a year inside the church with the puppets?
Yeah, well, I think because me and Oliver did a lot of the church stuff. He was there before me. He was doing all the church stuff where you're looking past all the pews towards the door, and I was doing stuff where you're looking towards the cross on the whole. And goodness, he was definitely in the church for about a year, I'd say, looking that way from what I understand. I probably just did a measly 4 or 5 months in the church. I wasn't really counting. And I did the stuff where you're looking at the crucifix and
Are you a believer
Geppetto.
now?
Well, I'm a big believer in Pinocchio's line. I'm paraphrasing here, but hey, he's made of wood. Why do they love him and not me? Why can't I be like Jesus? I did giggle to myself profusely that I got the "why do they love him and not me" line.
That's a good line.
Yeah, and that's something to think about for 4 months, 5 months?
Yeah.
While you're there.
Yes. It's the wonderful thing that you can imagine any small child saying, "Why do they love Jesus more than me? Why don't I get the same treatment that Jesus gets?"
Was it tiring spending that much time on a scene that, lasts, 5-10 minutes? Didn't you want to go and do something else? Like, please let me animate the fish.
I thought you were going to say, like bang my head on a wall. And actually, Bartek was doing the dogfish in the unit opposite me with the church. So I kept going in to go and see Bartek with this massive dogfish and the motion control machine that simulated it swimming. And I love big monster stuff. So I kept going in to go, at least to see what he was doing and ask questions and learn about it, because there's a part of me that loves doing stuff like that. It's very unique. But in terms of number of frames and speed and how on earth you cope with the fact that you're only doing, and let me think, I think when I did Carlo in the forest picking up the pine cone, that might have only been around 30 frames a day, and I think we were there's 24 frames a second. And if there's a camera move, because the camera's moving every frame, you normally have to move the puppet every frame as well. It depends what the puppet's doing. When I was animating Geppetto, if the camera's not moving, because you can animate a bit faster, you can move the puppet every other frame, which we call twos. If the camera's moving, you have to move the puppet every frame a lot of the time, which we call ones. So ones, you'd be doing 24 movements per second. Twos, you'd be doing 12 movements per second. But I think with Geppetto, I was often doing 35. Sometimes I did 40 frames a second.
Ooh,
40 frames a day, depending what it was. Pinocchio was faster because he has these replacement faces. So you pull off his nose, you pull off his face, it's like a mask, and then you put on a different face, you put the nose back on, and then you just animate the body. But you're just swapping masks effectively. Whereas with Geppetto, he's got all the mechanics. So I've got to move the lips, and I've got to move the moustache, and then I've got to move the eyebrows. And then the bit that takes loads of time is the eyeball and the eyelids. You're using a little pin to press against the eyeball and do very subtle eye darts as the eyes are scanning or moving as they're thinking. And the eyelids, which have to widen or go down slightly, because obviously if your character's a bit more surprised or something unexpected happens, the eyes open wider. Whereas if your character's thinking or squinting, the eyelids close a little bit. So you're using a pin to control the eyelids. And I'm just talking about Geppetto's face here with the moustache and the eyeballs and the eyebrows. So you can spend 5-10 minutes doing Geppetto's face before you do his body. Whereas Pinocchio, you don't have to do all the little detail with the face. You're just swapping a mask. So I found that shot with Pinocchio when he turns and says, why do they love him and not me? I think I did 80 or even 100 frames in one day, which was, that's 4 seconds, 100 frames, 96 frames. Which was very lucky because I had a plane to catch that day. So I had to get that shot done, which shows with the right motivation, maybe you go a bit faster.
Yeah, but I'm always fascinated how much patience and precision you
have to be very zen.
Yeah, for the
yes,
type of work that you do. And you have to have a very special disposition to be able to do that for that long of a time.
I mean, yeah, making 2 seconds of a movie on a good day per day, and the movie is 120 minutes long.
Yeah.
So I mean, come on.
I like Hubert's description of it must have a very special disposition. I feel like I should have my feet up on the counsellor's couch and Tim, let's talk about how do you feel? Let's talk about what's wrong with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I worked on Geppetto's eyelids for 3 months.
Well, those are the moments when you get some puppets where it could just be one eyeball, where you've moved the other eyeball and that's fine. And then so I've moved his right eye, and now I've got to move his left eye, and I need them both to move the same direction. You don't obviously have one eyeball going up and the other eyeball going down. So you've got your pin against the eyeball, and you move it, and clunk, it goes too far. Okay, I've got to try and get it a little bit left a bit. Oh God, it's gone too far left. Right, get it. And you get the eyeball in exactly the right space eventually, but the eyelid has gone up too high, or the eyelid has fallen behind the back of the eyeball. So I've got to pull the eyebrow up and try and fish out this eyelid and I get the eyelid back in place, but now the eyeballs move. So I've got to try and get the eyeball back in position. And you realise that 20 minutes passed, and you're like, and I still haven't got the one eye in the right place. And that's a real head in your hands. I don't know what to do. Other than sobbing, I'm not sure what to do to get this bloody eye. And it can just be one thing like that, or one eyelid that you can't get the damn thing in the right place. And that's the bit where you question your patience.
Okay, so what about the creatures or animals? They have eyelids, they have eyes, but they have fur or claws or whatever. Is it more difficult?
Which creatures are we talking about? Is this are we talking other films or
no? Spazzatura. He has fur.
Spazzatura. Ah, yes.
I guess.
Oh, I did not do Volpe or Spazzatura, but I think Spazzatura was all silicone. Maybe he had the odd tuft of fur, but I think a lot of it was all silicone rubber.
I mean, he had hair that looked like it wasn't hair, but a lot of detail, right? So I think it was the same material as Geppetto's hair and beard and.
Yeah, and you're a specialist, so
and
you
you're a
would know.
specialist. You know about
it's
moustache.
silicone.
So come on.
It's silicone. It's rubber. So some of Geppetto's hair had wire in it. Spaz, I only had a brief touch of the puppet. I never animated him. I know his tail was tricky because you move his hips and that can move his tail out of place. So then you've got to get the tail back into position. You move his body first and then you move the other parts. So I think sometimes keeping his tail on the floor was difficult because it's wire coming out of his backside. And by being wire, it won't always just sit on the floor. It will slightly levitate by a couple of millimeters. Then you've got to try and push it back on to the floor. But because it's wire, it keeps coming away from the floor. So that sort of thing gets irritating.
Let's talk a bit about things that actually weren't there. What things were added in post-production? What things were added as a CGI effects?
Yeah. How much do you cheated?
Yeah,
Have you cheated? Come on.
When you look at the end
Not
credits...
as much as Leica.
When you look at the end credits, there is quite a lot of visual effects done by and the name of the company, and there's quite a few people working on visual effects, and I assume that's the CGI part of the movie. But how much of it was really stop motion, and how much?
Yeah, we won't tell anyone.
Yeah.
Just come on, be honest.
But between the three of us and the internet, it was I think that the bulk of the CGI, I believe, is the water. And of course, there's loads of that later on in the film. That's the vast bulk of it. And certainly it's the stuff that you see on screen the most. And it was really cool watching some of Chuck Duke did a huge amount of Geppetto and Pinocchio in the water, whether they're drowning or being washed up onto the beach. But that was all done on green screen with a rig. So you'd watch these fascinating shots where you've just got Geppetto in front of green with a rig to move him up and down. And Chuck was simulating all the water stuff. In fact, the shot where Geppetto's drowning and Pinocchio's trying to pull him up to the surface, even the green screen version of that is incredibly emotional. It's one of my favourite shots in the film, even watching it on green, because I really feel, oh my God, isn't Geppetto too heavy? Can Pinocchio get to the surface? And he's sinking. And I watched the green screen version. I said, Chuck, you've got me, man. That's amazing. But yeah, so I'll quickly finish on the water, then I'll try and remember what else is in there CGI wise. One of the animators meetings, Brian said to us that they realised that much like shots on the church set had to be done early, otherwise we wouldn't get them done by the deadline. All the CGI water, every shot took 3 months to go through the process of different layers of water and approvals and then rendering. So that meant if we didn't shoot all the water shots now, they wouldn't have time to do all the CGI post-production before the release in the cinema. So suddenly it was a priority to do all those green screen CGI shots. 3 months or so per shot for the animated water. That's a lot of work. And one of the reasons why you see so many names on the credits for all the CGI work, much of it was done, I don't know, it was done in so many different countries or companies. I don't have a list to hand of who did that. Other stuff, we had lots of green screen backgrounds which had a stop motion plate. So they'd film the background from the stop motion set separately. And that was maybe because the set was busy being used for another shot. But I need the church behind Geppetto. So I shot Geppetto on green, and then later they put a background from the church behind him. So there's a lot of stuff like that. Guys, can you think of any other CGI
I was wondering
examples?
about all those effects like snow falling or some fire or explosions.
So
or something
particles,
like that. Yeah,
mostly.
particle effects.
Yeah, the fire, which has a lovely stop motion look. There's the shot where Sebastian Cricket, he lights a match, and that was in the teaser, and it looks like a kind of stop motion-y fire.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that was all CGI. That was they planned the style to not look like a perfect flame. But that was a cool little look. Snow would obviously have been CGI, because pity the person who'd have to try and animate that in stop motion. Although when I did things like Isle of Dogs and Fantastic Mr. Fox, all of those effects were done as, say, green screen elements for fire and smoke and what have you. We did it as a stop motion cotton wool or soap fire effect. I think the balloon is CGI as well, if I recall. When Geppetto goes to the circus to try and find Pinocchio, we're just as Pinocchio's left, and there's a balloon that's been kicking around. But balloons are a pain to do in stop motion, especially to be transparent.
Yeah,
They did want, of course, for it to have a stop motion-y look. So I'd say, with the exception of the water in particular, and smoke, smoke. CGI lends itself to smoke really well. Things are either painting like. There's some backgrounds that are matte painting, or the flame has a effect look. They have a specific look. Like even the water doesn't look realistic, but it's got a stylistic look. So I think that's maybe the best way of saying it. They wanted a stylistic look that wasn't real.
I'm still with the water thing, because I was also wondering when watching the movie, I was wondering about the seawater, but not when they're underwater, but when the camera is on the surface, and the surface of the waters look I don't know, it looks like it was stop motion, but I have no idea how it was done.
It has a kind of feel like it's got a skin when you see it on the surface of the water. Do you mean when Pinocchio and Spazzatura are on the raft?
Yeah.
For example. Yeah, the water moves as if it's got like a kind of skin to it, which is a curious look. I'm not involved in any of these conversations. They're all way out. They put me in a dark little room with a puppet, so I get to find out later what the water's going to look like. I think water's always a challenge, to not try and look too realistic, but yeah, finding that style, just finding an appropriate style is an interesting one. And I have no input in those conversations other than people talk about it with curiosity afterwards, going, "Oh, have you seen what they've done with the water?"
Yeah, because that's a big machine, and you have no idea what's going on simultaneously in the other, not even in the other hall or building, but in the other country. Because
I'm busy with my head in my hands because I can't get the eyeball in the right position.
Exactly. But speaking about input, did you guys have any, I don't know, let's say creative input into the scene or characters' behavior besides acting out the scenes?
Yeah, well, first of all, acting out the scene is your first chance to give it your take. So creatively, you're saying, "What about this?" and then see what feedback you get. So actually, you've got quite a lot of input in that very first bit of doing the lav. But also, Mark and Guillermo were very open to comments about what about this, or what do you think of that? I mean, with any conversation with the director, I have to shut up and let them talk. Let them give their first impression, what they're emotionally after. But you can give them you can give them a few options, like do you mean like this, or do you like that, or what do you think of this? But they're the boss. I can present a few ways we could approach doing it. But if they like the idea, great. If they don't, fine. That shot with Carlo picking up the pine cone. When I think I'd done the block. The block is a rehearsal go where you don't do full animation, but you try and test out as much as of the movement and the timing as you can do. Guillermo came into the set and he said, and I think in that moment he had the idea. He said, "Oh, when Carlo holds the pine cone up, he should look at it and give it a little squint, as if he's analysing it. He's focusing on it before he holds it up to Geppetto and says, 'What about this one?'"
I'll never get tired of that line.
I will be going to bed saying that now. And I said to Guillermo, I said, no problem at all to do that little squint as if he's really analysing it for a second. But I said, that's going to take a bit longer. I don't, as it currently stands, he holds up the pine cone. If you want him to squint at it and then say his line, I need a bit more time for us to register him squinting. And Guillermo said, "Oh, have another 16 frames." or to the production scheduler, take another half day. so I've got to be very careful about suggesting making something longer because there was a genuine production issue. But it was a genuine potential problem. If Guillermo wants a squint and I haven't got time to do the squint's not going to register. He won't get what he wants. So I said, yeah, I'll need a bit more time. And if Guillermo says, have another 16 frames, it's like, yeah, that should work. And that's me feeling the performance of what would tell the story, what would read to the audience. And then he said, good luck, and gave me a fist bump. Great way to start my first shot. He held his fist up and I was like, oh, right, we're doing this, are we? Boom, fist bump. So that was a fun start. So I think with proposing ideas or even suggesting that something may have a knock-on effect that would cause a problem, it's not my job to disagree with any director, but it's my job to help the director talk it through. And if you can see that something might create a problem, of course, that's your opportunity to raise it. And it's their call. I'll give you another example as well, actually. When Geppetto walks up Geppetto has just given Pinocchio Carlo's book in the church. And Pinocchio goes, I love it, I love it, I love it. What is it? And of course doesn't realise the importance of the book that he's been given. And I do the shot where Geppetto stands up and says, it's a school book, a very important school book. Now, I can't quite do the gruff voice, but I do the kids' voices much better. Geppetto in this shot has to make very strong eye contact with Pinocchio because he's trying to communicate, it's a school book and this book's really important to me. This is a really special thing I'm giving you. That's the kind of emotional context behind what he's doing. And Geppetto has the mallet because he's just been hammering a peg into the Jesus statue. I think he's attached in the arm. But he then comes down with this little wooden mallet and he uses that mallet a bit like an emotional prop, something to hold close. And the shot that I had was from a low angle of Geppetto walking towards Pinocchio. You could say he was looming over Pinocchio as he gets close, looking very intensely. And he's holding this mallet. So I had two problems. One was, well, how do I make this man who's much, much bigger than Pinocchio loom over him, looking intently at him, holding a mallet without it looking threatening, like he's got a weapon. So I had to try and think, all right, I've got to almost caress the mallet rather than hold it in a way that could be in any way intimidating. And Guillermo said it would be great if he did a little gesture where he taps the mallet a couple of times when he's thinking, the first line is, it's a school book. And he's trying to find the word to say why the school book's very important. So he's thinking how to communicate this book's really important. And Guillermo said, I want him to tap the mallet a couple of times. And I thought, well, tapping could mean lots of things, couldn't it? Tapping could mean I'm impatient. Tapping could mean I'm frustrated. It could mean all sorts. I thought, how do I tap without it being distracting or communicating the wrong thing? So I had a good chat with Mark Gustafson about maybe if I do it really subtly, like a dink, dink. This doesn't work so well in podcasts. I'm making a sound effect to describe how I might tap a mallet. Dink, dink.
So that's a good subtle sound effect. We accept
Thank
that.
You.
Sounds
this
very
is
gentle.
What we do. We use sounds and we use words to try and express how a character's feeling, even though they're not actually saying that line. So when I'm talking to a director, that might be, oh, do you mean he feels like this? You can use sound effects to do it as well. Do you mean, or do you mean he's thinking, or he's thinking, or Ah. So do you mean like that? Is that how he feels?
Okay, so remember that when talking to Guillermo del Toro, use a lot of sound effects. That helps.
Yeah, sound effects, hand gestures, not those hand gestures. But he's open, and because when you're having this discussion, part of it is me trying to demonstrate to Guillermo, do you mean like this? Have I understood you correctly? And because if I just stand there saying, okay, I've got it, he doesn't know if I've got it until he sees the actual shot. It's very important if I almost repeat back to him what he said, or I maybe say it using different words, just to demonstrate and for him to feel confident that I get it, that I understand. So that's all part of the briefing and the communication. Just reiterating that you're on the same page.
And when you heard about tapping in your head, you thought, shit, it will be September when I finish that shot.
That's 2 weeks per single tap, so 3 taps.
Yes.
But still, you said about your work both with Guillermo and Mark Gustafson, and the movie has 2 directors, basically. But I guess they're both responsible for 2 very different things. And in my mind, the simplest distinction would be that Guillermo is about the feeling, the atmosphere, the emotions, and Mark is about the technical stuff. Is that true, or is it completely the other way around?
We're definitely about Guillermo. I would say Mark is also very much about the emotions. And here's what we're trying to do. How do we get there? How do we do it? But also he's very, very good at dealing with the practical problems of how does the puppet reach this object he's got to get to? Or from this camera angle, he can't actually do what we need him to do. How do we change the angle, or how do we make that work? So how do I, as a stop motion animator, physically do what we're asking for? And there's often big physical restrictions. So he's really good at talking through the practical problems the animator has. But he still completely gets what Guillermo's after, and he might go into a bit more detail about certain things than Guillermo would. But Mark's a director, he's not an animator himself either. So if I want to get stuck into frame by frame detail, then I'll grab Brian Hansen, the animation supervisor, and we can have that chat. Or to be honest, if all of them are busy, you can go and grab another animator who's is a friend and you trust their opinion. And because you need a different perspective sometimes. When you're so busy fighting an eyeball, you need someone else who's got a bit more distance than you do to come in and give you their first impression. So Mark and Guillermo were this wonderful combination of Guillermo's passion, his overview, his vision, and Mark understood all of those things, but then could get into the detail and the practical side of how do we actually do this. He was very good at that.
And you kind of answered the question that I had for you, like that we were also wondering if you had a chance to like interact with other animators and help each other out and influence what you were doing. And well, you just kind of answered that yes, you did.
Well, I can go deeper because we've all kind of become each other's counselors. We're so into the detail of what we're doing, and some of those practical problems, like, oh, my character's head is too close to the wall, or Pinocchio's long nose means that I can't get the face off. How do I get? I can't physically get the face off because something's blocking the nose. Or so there's practical things, but there's also performance things. The number of times that other animators would come to me or I'd go to them because they're just so close to the shot. They need to get out, have a moment's distance, and get a fresh perspective from someone else. And that was very regular, that people would come to me or I'd pop in to see someone else and they go, Tim, I need a second opinion. What do you think? And that was nice because you get to go and see what other people are doing. You get to analyze someone else's timing and spacing with how they structure their performance, and that gives you ideas, or you learn from the other person what they're succeeding in, where they're having mistakes, I suppose you'd call it. Or and also it's really healthy to talk to other people who are also having a bad day or also struggling. The number of times I'm like, right, come on, I'm taking you for a beer after work. Come and get it off your chest. So we needed each other in practical sense, in a performance sense, but also in an emotional sense, because a lot of people felt we're all our own worst critic, and we focus on all the things that we didn't get right much more than the things that we did. So people often need to let it out and talk it through.
That goes into the the information also from IMDb, that Pinocchio is right now the longest stop motion feature film ever.
Wow.
And did it feel that way when you were working on it?
Well,
and
we kind of get the feeling that it
how
did. How
many beers did you have to drink to get it out of your head?
Hey guys, when I last saw you in Poznań, there's a video of me doing the Chuck Steele introduction, and I've got a big tummy. Goodness, I've lost a lot of weight since then. But that gives you an idea of American food and American beer, and how many counselling sessions, or how much. Okay, I need a pick me up. How often did that happen?
Yeah, but did it really feel longer than working, let's say, on Isle of Dogs or Fantastic Mr. Fox?
Fox, I wasn't there long enough, so I came towards the end of Fox. I just lapped it all up. Isle of Dogs, I was there for nearly 17 months, so that was a long project for me. Pinocchio, I was there for nearly 8 months, but there were some people who were there for a good 2 years. Or the first week of shooting happened in March 2020, and people may be able to join the dots there and realise that they had 1 week of shooting when the pandemic kicked in and they had to go into lockdown. So you can imagine for the crew who were there at the start, a massive delay, and then when they started shooting again, social distancing was a thing and mask wearing, of course, so that slowed things down. So for the people that were there from the very start, they had a really long time, and during that first year of the production, they had riots in Portland, they had big forest fires, they had a heat wave where it would be 40 degrees centigrade. So they went through with the pandemic as well, they went through all sorts. So I came at the end when I had this crew who had been through this ridiculous experience. So for a lot of people, it was a very long thing. And for me, 8 months was perfect. Really good time to get to know people, make some wonderful friends, really become part of the family, both in the studio and on the weekends and in the evenings and things. So I really felt I bonded with lots and lots of people, and it was very sad to say goodbye at the end. But equally, I'd been away from home, I'd been away from family, so I was also ready to come home at the end. Did it feel like a long time? It felt like you're in a bubble. You're all living together in this crazy Big Brother experiment, having to put up with each other's hopes, dreams, frustrations.
Whatever you guys did on the set and however many trials and tribulations you had, like this was the end result is, dare I say, it is fantastic.
It is fantastic, absolutely. And the curious thing, not only about Pinocchio, but Hubert wrote that question, is that many directors that you have interacted with at one point in their career decide to do a stop motion animation. It's Tim Burton, it's Wes Anderson, and now Guillermo del Toro. Why stop motion is so, interesting for them?
Well, I think that handcrafted thing, that's the thing that people find incredibly endearing. And there's been many essays written on this subject, but the notion of miniatures, the notion of your toys coming to life, I genuinely think it's the eliciting that nostalgia from your childhood of your toys coming to life, which people warm to, people resonate because it brings back this childhood nostalgic feeling. But equally, whenever people see all these miniature props or miniature sets, or the puppets are now, the Pinocchio puppets and many of the sets are doing an exhibition in New York, and then I think soon Portland, Oregon. And when people see these, goodness, they light up and they love the handcrafted detail, especially small things. People get incredibly fascinated and full of awe and wonder at small handcrafted things. It has that innate tactile thing that people do just warm to, that it's made by hand. And I think we, in a world where we're not really so impressed by CGI effects anymore because we've kind of seen it all. People love handcrafted detail. So I think in the same way, directors are drawn to it. And of course, as you know, Pinocchio celebrates its stop motion look. They're kind of described as live action actors who happen to be stop motion puppets. And let's hope they keep making those films, because it's been a long time since Toy Story came out, and people were telling me that, stop motion's dead, it's going to be replaced by CGI. And here we are some 27 years later. What you see with Leica is interesting. They increasingly do more of a combination of CGI and stop motion, which is interesting. But then you look at things like Ida Dogs and Fantastic Mr. Fox, which embrace this all handcrafted look.
For me, Pinocchio was kind of special in that way that usually when I watch animation, I'm really aware of the fact that I'm watching animation. It is very rare for me to just sort of forget that I'm watching animation. But with Pinocchio, I just sort of caught myself in the middle of a movie. Like when I stopped thinking about it as an animated movie, I just, yes, those are characters, those are real characters, and I'm watching them doing things. I'm not watching stop motion characters. I'm watching just people. Characters. Yeah, I'm watching people, characters. Yeah. And it was kind of fun because I was starting the movie with an intention of, I will look for those tiny little details I can ask him about it. But then in the middle, I just sort of gave up and I just enjoyed the ride.
Yeah, which is exactly obviously what they want, and clearly so well done. I've had a lot of people say that to me, including a lot of the animators I'm working with now. I'm working with some wonderful, experienced, talented people on Chicken Run 2, and I've had people here saying to me that they forgot they were animated puppets. They just believed in the characters and cared about them, which is perfect. That's it's very hard to imagine as an animator, or definitely looking at the directors and the animation supervisor from their overview. I mean, what a success to generate characters that you truly just believe in, and you're with them.
Okay, so two quick questions to sum up everything. The first one is why Disney's new Pinocchio is so much worse according to everyone, and is it because live action is not the way to go with magical stories?
Well, thank goodness I haven't seen it, so I can't say anything controversial. Well, I think I've seen the trailer once.
And that was enough.
Yeah, and you know, I'm the generation, of course, that grew up with all of the 2D version of all these films. So I think people who aren't, you know, under the age of 20, who didn't see these things the first time round, are kind of going, okay, they're doing live action versions of everything. And from a business point of view, I can see that makes sense. But I think creatively, a lot of people aren't very inspired to rehash their own films. But yeah, I think for a younger audience that don't know the originals, then that probably is the audience
you said
they're going for more.
Business decision, soulless business decision. Unfortunately,
I think it's the lack of
movie making.
In this version.
That's what it was. Yeah, oh goodness, the number of High Hitlers in the Guillermo's version that animators like, well, I'm not sure that I'm comfortable doing this. Well, it was I guess he believes in authenticity. So if he's setting it in that era, and that is a fascination for him, that era, then yes. But no, Tom Hanks didn't do that, I'm guessing. So, okay.
And finally, the final question would be about the superhero thing, but you already got to answer that 3 years ago. Am I right?
Yeah, but
is it still the same answer?
I believe you said Batman the last time.
Yeah,
so
that's one of the correct answers.
I think that once you go Batman, you never come back. You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So instead, you know, Pinocchio, it's done. So now it's time to, you know, hype up the next big thing. So tell me, is Chicken Run 2 going to be out soon? And is it going to be just as good as the first one?
It's great. You know, I've seen a test screening. I'm sure I'm absolutely zip-tied on anything I can say. But I'm sure I'm allowed to say we've seen it. We've had a test screening and we all came out thinking, wow, this film is really good. It's not simply a sequel. It's very, very good. It's funny. The character development. It's very, very excited. Yeah, and outlived my expectations. To be honest, I was really a big fan of the first. And
that was 20 years ago.
That's quite some time ago.
It came out in 2000, and
so
when they were making,
damn.
yeah. When they were making it, I was graduating, and I had some friends who graduated just before me and who were on it. So it was the big thing that was being made in the town not too far away from where I graduated, or city in Bristol. So that was the big project when I graduated, and I was too inexperienced, really. I would only have got a very, very, very junior role on it, and I decided to try and get experience at smaller companies where I'd be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. At that time, but yeah, that was the first big feature film, really. After you'd had Nightmare, you'd had James the Giant Peach, and then Chicken Run was huge. So to be able to be involved in the sequel all these years later, I say with genuine pride, I'm super happy to be here, and got lots of friends here at Aardman. It's not my first time here, so this was lovely to come from Pinocchio to this, and this is looking like a great film. Yeah, so I can see myself walking away very, very proud of this. But to come back to the Pinocchio, guys, I haven't quite moved on yet, because it only came out on Netflix this past weekend. And I've been doing, what is it now? It's now 23 years since my first professional job as a stop-motion animator. I've never had as wonderful a reaction to a film as I'm getting for Pinocchio. People from so many parts of my life have been getting in touch, to say, not just to say how much they loved it, but really raving, like really over the top. Oh my God, it's my favorite animation film ever. Or the thing I keep hearing, it made me cry.
Yes.
hearing a lot of people, yes, we made them cry. Success. All those hours poking an eyeball with a pin and crying myself, and now you cry, now you feel it. But the reaction in general, I'm not going to say overwhelming, because I knew how much I loved this film.
Yeah, I remember when we saw each other at the Animator Festival, you were telling me all the time, like, I think this is going to be huge. I think this is the greatest thing ever. And you really made me excited about the movie. And it turns out that you were
kind of right.
Damn. Well, and you know what? Because I've been feeling this way for a long time now, that I know how good this film is. In fact, I think this is an incredibly special, one of the greatest animated films of all time. I really believe that. So to have it come out, and suddenly so many friends and family and other professionals are getting in touch saying the same thing, to say it's heartwarming or satisfying is an understatement. I mean, I don't need lots of praise or well done, Tim, you did a good job. But I feel like I've been part of something that's very, very special. And I'm incredibly grateful to have had that opportunity, especially because I nearly didn't ever go. I didn't really want to have a long time away from home, and then the pandemic came and delayed the film. So I thought twice about getting in touch and seeing if there'd be a space for me. So this nearly never happened for me. And the other thing I'm going to say about Pinocchio, not just has it been an amazing final result, really big film that's been getting a big push from Netflix, and it's obviously an incredibly prestigious director, Guillermo, who's in an absolute role now. But my experience of being there, the people, the line producer, the directors, the friends that I made, I had such a warm, wonderful, happy time there. And I remember saying to Mel, the line producer, Melanie Coombs, in the first couple of weeks, how much I loved the atmosphere there. I loved the ideology of how they were doing things. And I loved the kind of performance. It's ticked all the boxes for me in reasonable working hours, wonderful people, creative, very stimulating and interesting, really good story, very well-known director, and it's getting a big marketing push, because you do some films and they don't have any money for marketing and they just disappear. Not only is this an amazing film that's getting a really big push, but the time I spent there, the experience in that crazy bubble when I wasn't trying to get an eyeball in the right position. I'm thrilled that I got to be part of that experience.
So there are two things that we are going to take out from this long ending sentence. First of all, we're going to use the part when you said ooh, I was part of something special and it almost didn't happen. And we're going to translate it directly into this podcast. Tim was part of something very special. He said that. And second of all, dear listeners, if you want to be as content with your work as Tim is, simply become a very well-known professional British animator.
With a 20-year experience.
And that's it. That's the key to success.
Right, bang. Okay, you found my formula.
And you were trying to keep it a secret for that many years.
Yes, keep jabbing an eyeball with a pin. Repeat until you sob. That's the initiation you've got to go through.
Yeah, but the story of Pinocchio has not ended. Oh my God, in the movie it wasn't ended as well. I don't know if he is still alive. Is he dead? Who knows? Yeah, but
I love the last line of the movie, guys. I don't know if I want to do a spoiler, but the very last sentence.
We forgot to give the spoiler warning. We did a bunch of spoilers in this episode, but that's the usual thing we do here.
I remember being at a test screening when all that ending bit was all animatic. It was all black and white drawings. And that very last line, what happens, and then you're gone. And I thought, oh God, I love that. The atheist in me is just set on fire. But equally, it's about moments and memories, and that none of us are here forever. So I think that was such a touching, powerful way to finish the film, because life ain't perfect, and then it's over. So it really is wonderful fuel for trying to make the most of things and trying to appreciate the people around you while you can do.
It's a way more wholesome version than life's a bitch and then you die.
Yes.
Exactly. And it's almost the same as this podcast, which is not perfect, but it's over.
Yeah, but it's here.
Guys, what happened.
Exactly, what happened, and no amount of post-production will erase it.
Yeah, so dear listeners, if you haven't seen Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio yet,
please
do it right away, because jest spoko.
Jest spoko.
That's the only part we're going to do in Polish in this
yeah.
episode. That's the tradition here. But yeah, go see it. It's great.
Thank you, Tim, for your time. Thank you for your work. Thank you for jabbing the eyeball in the correct way. And hopefully Chicken Run 2 will be as good or even better. And we can talk in, I don't know, a year or two, and you'll be gushing about your work on Chicken Run 2.
You've moved the bar. They've got to all be better than the last one.
They have to be. Thank you very much, Tim. Have a great evening, and hopefully see you soon.
Hubert, Philip, thank you so much. Good to catch up, guys.
Koniec.